The bread was already gone before she realized she had given it away. She had not meant to do it consciously. The man had been sitting against the wall of the lower quarter granary, his cloak torn at the shoulder, his boots cracked through at the sole, and something in the angle of his spine, not defeated precisely but held very carefully, like a man containing something larger than hunger, had made her hand move before her mind had time to deliberate. The loaf had been the last of what she'd brought from the communal hearth. It was the size of her 2 fists pressed together. It was everything she had until the morning distribution. She had set it on the ground beside him without speaking. He had looked up. His eyes were grey, not the dull grey of Riverstone, but the specific grey of the sky in the hour before a storm, the kind of grey that has weather behind it. They were not the eyes of a beggar. She noted that, filed it away, and left before he could say anything that would require her to explain herself. Her name was Tova. She was 23 years of age, the lowest-ranked Omega in the Thornmere pack territory, and she had not eaten that evening. These were simply facts. She moved through facts, the way she moved through the lower quarter itself, efficiently, without complaint, keeping close to the walls. Thornmere was not a large territory. It occupied the eastern slope of a forested ridge, bordered to the north by a river that flooded every 3rd winter, and to the south by the disputed boundary with the Ashven clan. The pack had roughly 400 souls, most of them middling ranked, most of them housed in the long stone buildings that ran parallel to the ridge. The lower quarter sat at the base of the slope, closest to the river and farthest from the great hall, and it smelled perpetually of wet earth and wood smoke. Tova had lived there her entire life. She earned her position as a healer's assistant, or rather, as the person who fetched, sorted, ground and catalogued what the healer herself did not wish to handle. Her hands knew the difference between dried feverfew and dried chamomile by touch alone. She could identify a poultice by its smell from 3 feet away. She had never been formally trained. She had simply been present and useful for long enough that the healer, a blunt woman named Osra, had stopped pretending Tova's knowledge was anything other than what it was. They did not speak warmly to one another. They worked well together. For Tova, this was sufficient. She was not, by any common reckoning, remarkable to look at. She was of middling height, with the kind of lean frame that comes from a life of practical work rather than scarcity, though scarcity had also played its part. Her hair was the dark brown of river mud after rain, worn in a thick braid that she pinned close to her skull to keep it from interfering with her work. Her eyes were the colour of amber held to the light, not brown, precisely, not gold, but something between, with a quality of attention in them that people sometimes found unsettling, as though she were cataloguing them the way she catalogued herbs. Her hands were calloused at the base of every finger. There was a burn scar on her left wrist, narrow and deliberate-looking, from a healer's flame 3 winters past. She did not consider herself a person of consequence. This was not self-pity. It was simply the accurate assessment of her position in the pack's social architecture. The man she had given the bread to was still against the wall when she passed again an hour later, returning from the apothecary with a bundle of stripped willow bark. He had not moved. The bread was gone. He was watching the great hall from across the courtyard with an expression she recognized, the expression of a person constructing a complete picture from partial evidence. She did not stop, but she noted it. That night, 3 pack wolves she had never seen approach the lower quarter came to her door. Not wolves in their shifted form, the large grey-silver animals that appeared sometimes near the forest edge and were understood to be something other than ordinary wolves, older and more deliberate in their attention. They sat outside her door in a row and did not leave until she opened it and stood in the threshold. Then the largest of the 3 lowered its head. She had heard of this. She had not believed it. She closed the door carefully and sat on the edge of her sleeping mat and did not sleep for a long time. What she did not know, could not have known, was that the man in the torn cloak had watched from across the courtyard, very still, as all three wolves turned from the great hall and walked without hesitation toward the lower quarter. He had watched them sit. He had watched the door open and the young woman appear in the light of her tallow candle, and he had watched the largest wolf lower its head, which was something it had not done for anyone in 31 years. The last time had been for his mother. He had been 7 years old. He stood in the dark for a long time after the door closed. His name was Casimir. He was the Alpha King of the Vael territories, which encompassed 11 packs across the eastern ridgeline, and he had been walking disguised through Thornmere for 3 days. The decision had not been made carelessly. He had ruled since he was 19, which meant he had ruled for 11 years, and in 11 years he had learned that the information that reached him through proper channels was shaped by the people who held those channels. He had learned to verify. The Thornmere pack was showing anomalies in its tribute reports, not large discrepancies, but precise ones, which was more concerning than careless ones. Careless errors were made by ordinary men. Precise errors were made by deliberate ones. He had come to see what his court's correspondence had declined to show him. He had come in rough clothes, with his rank marks hidden, and his wolf quiet at the back of his mind, asking it to hold still and let him observe without the complication of its attention pulling toward things he had not decided to attend to. It had held still for exactly 3 days. Then it had walked 3 of the ancient pack wolves directly to the door of a lower quarter Omega healer's assistant, who had given him her last bread without introduction, without condition, and without waiting to see whether he would thank her. He did not know what to do with this. He was not, in general, a man who did not know what to do. He found the sensation deeply unfamiliar. He returned the following morning. She was already at the apothecary when he arrived at the lower quarter. He did not go inside. He stood where she could see him, if she chose to, which was a form of honesty he had not extended to anyone in 3 days, and waited. She came out with a clay pot braced against her hip, and stopped when she saw him. "You ate the bread," she said. It was not an accusation. "I did," he said. "Thank you for it." She looked at him the way she had looked at him the previous evening, that quality of attention, assembling the picture. He was aware that he was failing to resemble a beggar in some specific way he could not entirely account for. He had been careful about the clothes. He had been less careful about the way he held himself. "You were watching the great hall," she said. "I was." "Are you looking for someone?" He considered the honest answer. "I'm looking at something," he said. "Whether I find it depends on what is here to find." She absorbed this. He noticed that she did not press him, which was either in curiosity or the disciplined intelligence of someone who understood that some questions yield more when they are not asked directly. He suspected the latter. "The pack wolves came to your door last night," he said. Something shifted in her face. Not quite surprise, more like confirmation. "You saw that?" "I did." "Do you know what it means?" He said nothing for a moment. "It is uncommon," he said finally. "Osra says it has not happened in the lower quarter in her lifetime," Tova said. "She is 64. She shifted the clay pot to her other hip. She also says the last time the ancient wolves deferred to an Omega in the territory records, the Thornmere pack was still ruled by a woman." She paused. She said this as though it were a curiosity, not a fact. Casimir looked at her for a long, still moment. "And what did you say?" "I said all facts were curiosities before they were facts." He returned to the great hall that afternoon, still in his rough clothes, and spent 2 hours reviewing the tribute ledgers with the Thornmere steward, a compact and careful man named Ferrin, who had the manner of someone who had practiced his competence long enough that it had become a kind of performance. Ferrin explained the discrepancies with the fluency of a prepared answer. The explanations were plausible. They were also identical in structure to the last 3 explanations he had given the previous year, which meant either the same unusual events were recurring with suspicious regularity, or the story had been rehearsed. Casimir thanked him with the precise warmth of a man who wishes to convey nothing, and returned to the lower quarter. He found Tova resetting a dislocated shoulder for one of the river workers, a large, grey-faced man who was gripping the edge of the work table with both hands, while Tova spoke to him in a very calm voice about the angle of his grip and the importance of not anticipating the moment before it happened. She counted to 3, and did not go on 3. She went on 2. The man made a sound like a struck drum, and then exhaled as she checked the alignment with 2 precise fingers and nodded. "Tomorrow you'll feel it more than today," she said. "The day after that less. By the 4th morning you'll have forgotten it." The man was looking at her with the expression common to people who have been helped efficiently and without condescension and are not entirely sure how to process it. He left a small bundle of dried meat on her table, which she noted without reaching for it immediately, as though making a private decision about whether to accept it. She accepted it. She set it near the clay pot and continued cleaning her hands. Casimir watched from the doorway. His wolf was not quiet. It had not been quiet since the previous night, and it was becoming less quiet with each passing minute, which was information of a specific and inconvenient kind. He had asked it to hold still. It was no longer holding still. He became aware that he was standing in the doorway, watching a woman clean her hands, and had been doing so for longer than was reasonable, and he made himself look at the wall instead. He counted 14 separate remedies arranged by use rather than by name, which was the more sophisticated organizational system. He counted the scarring on her left wrist. He counted the way her attention moved through the room, efficient, unsentimental, and completely present, missing nothing. The river worker passed him on the way out and gave him the searching look of a man who recognized another man standing too carefully in a doorway. Casimir ignored this. "You can come in, or you can leave," Tova said, without looking up. "Standing in the doorway is useful to neither of us." He came in. It was 3 more days before he told her who he was. He used those 3 days well. He walked the packed territory end to end. He counted the tribute storage against the reported figures. He visited the border markers on the Ashford boundary and found 2 of them moved, not by much, not enough to trigger an immediate dispute, but consistently, 1 step at a time, in a direction that would matter in 10 years. He spoke to the lower quarter families and the river workers and the forest edge herders, who spoke to him with the directness of people who have no reason to perform for a stranger. He also, on the 2nd of those days, found a leather-bound register in the apothecary back room. It was not hidden. It was simply where Tova worked, which most people avoided, and it was written in a small, precise hand that matched the quality of her attention. It was not a remedy catalogue. It was, as near as he could determine, a complete and meticulously maintained record of the tribute discrepancies across 7 seasons, gathered from public observation, from overheard conversations, from the particular detail-noticing intelligence of someone who moved through the lower quarter invisibly and had decided to use that invisibility for something. He stood with the register in his hands for a long time. He had come to Thornmere to find out what was wrong. She had already found it. She had simply had no one to give the information to. He told her on the 3rd morning, in the low light before the apothecary opened. He set the register on the table between them and told her plainly his name, his title, the reason for the disguise, and what he intended to do with what he had learned. He watched her face as he spoke. She did not look shocked. She looked, he thought, like a person who had half suspected something of this order and had been waiting to find out whether her suspicion was correct. "The grey eyes," she said. "Yes." "I thought you were a Lord's factor," she said. "Someone sent to look at the accounts, not the king himself." She was quiet for a moment. "The bread. You did not know," he said. "I was not going to pretend otherwise." She looked at him for a long time. He had the impression she was revising a substantial number of assumptions at once, calmly, systematically, in the order of their importance. "The wolves," she said finally, "the 3 that came to my door." "I cannot explain that," Casimir said. This was the first honest thing he had said that cost him something. "My wolf chose to send them. I did not direct it." Tova looked at the register, then at him. "What happens now?" "I need to take this to a formal proceeding," he said. "The evidence you have gathered is the clearest record of what has been done here, but it needs to be presented in the right setting, before the right witnesses." "You could present it yourself," she said. "I could," he agreed, "but it is your register. You built it. You observed and recorded across 7 seasons when no one asked you to, and no one would have thanked you for it. It should be your voice in the room when it is put on the table." She was quiet for a long time. He did not press her. "I have never been inside the great hall," she said finally. "You will need to be," he said, "unless you choose otherwise." She looked at her hands, the burn scar on her left wrist. "If I present this and it goes wrong—" "It will not go wrong," he said. "I will be in the room." "That is not the same as it not going wrong," she said. "That is only the same as you being present while it goes wrong." He considered this. It was accurate. "You are correct," he said. "It could go wrong in specific ways that my presence would not prevent. I will not promise you it cannot. I can tell you that your register is the most complete account of 7 seasons of falsified tribute that I have seen in 11 years of ruling, and that a falsified tribute case presented with this quality of documentation has not failed an institutional hearing in the recorded history of the Vile Council." He paused. "That is the accurate version." She met his eyes. The amber-lit quality of her attention turned on him without flinching, without deference, in the particular way it had been doing since she set bread on the ground beside him and walked away. "All right," she said. "Tell me what the room looks like." The formal hearing was convened 5 days later by the authority of the Alpha King in the great hall of the Thornmere estate. It was the first formal Alpha King's hearing held in Thornmere in 19 years. The hall was full. Ferrin, the steward, had been informed that morning. He had spent the intervening hours composing his expression into something that would read as cooperative, and he had done this well enough that Tova, entering the great hall for the first time, noted it and filed it away. She was wearing a grey wool gown that Osra had produced without comment from the back of a chest. Her hair was pinned as always. She carried the leather register under her arm. The pack ranked themselves by order on the long benches, as they always did at formal proceedings. High rank near the front, low rank at the back. Tova had always been at the back. She walked to the front of the room and set her register on the presenting table and stood beside it, and the sound of that walk, her boots on the stone floor, 200 pairs of eyes, was the loudest silence she had ever experienced. Casimir was at the head of the room. He had not, she realized, told her to look at him if she felt uncertain. He had told her what the room looked like. He had told her where the witnesses would sit. He had trusted her to prepare herself, which was different from reassuring her, and was more useful. She opened the register to the first page of the tributary record. She did not look up. 7 seasons, she said. Her voice was level. It was the voice she used when she needed the river worker, not to anticipate the set. 14 separate figures. The pattern is consistent. I will walk through it. She walked through it. Ferrin's careful expression held for the first 4 pages. It began to slip on the 5th, when she produced a secondary record she had cross-referenced against the Public Tithe Board, a document that could only have been falsified if both the steward and the 2 senior tribute counters were in agreement, which meant this was not the error of one man, but a coordinated account. One of the senior tribute counters stood and began to object. Casimir said one word, quiet, final, the word of a man who does not need volume to achieve authority, and the man sat down. Tova did not look up. She continued through the 6th page. By the time she reached the final entry, the silence in the room had changed quality. It was no longer the silence of an audience watching something uncertain. It was the silence of an outcome that has already been determined and is waiting for the form to catch up with the fact. The Vale Council member present, a senior man named Edreth, who had ridden with Casimir's party and whose role was specifically to certify findings of this type, called the formal vote. It was brief. The tribute falsification was recorded, certified, and remanded for full council review. Ferrin and the 2 tribute counters were placed under pack guard, pending transport to the Vale capital. It was not dramatic. It was institutional. It was exactly as satisfying as Casimir had said it would be. Tova closed the register. The room remained silent. She became aware then of something that had been true for the past several minutes without her having attended to it. The wolves had come in from the forest. Not 3, perhaps 40. They stood at the edges of the great hall, in the open doorways, at the narrow windows, along the courtyard wall, and they were all facing the same direction. They were facing her. The ancient pack wolves, the ones that lived at the forest edge and had their own hierarchy and their own logic, and had never, in any record Osra had referenced, entered the great hall in a body. They were in the doorways, and their heads were down. The room was very, very quiet. She heard Casimir's voice from the head of the table, not the formal hearing voice, something quieter. "It seems," he said, "that the matter is settled in more than one jurisdiction." Someone in the back benches made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one. The tension broke like a fever breaking. Edrith certified the final record. The hearing was formally closed. Tova stood with her hand flat on the cover of the register for a moment after the room began to move again. She could feel Casimir approaching from the head of the table. Not hear him, not see him, but feel it, the way you feel weather changing, the way you feel a fire when you turn toward it. She did not move her hand from the register. He stopped beside her, not behind her, not in front of her, beside her, level. "You did not look at me," he said. "I didn't need to," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said, "you didn't." She looked at him then. The grey eyes, the quality of a man who had spent 11 years ruling and had not entirely become the thing that ruling required, or had but was aware of it, which was not the same thing. He was looking at her with an expression she did not entirely have a name for. It was not the expression of a king. It was the expression of a man watching something he has not seen before and is trying to understand whether he is allowed to want it. "What happens to the register?" she said. "It becomes part of the official Vale Council record," he said. "Properly attributed." She nodded. This was correct. "Tova," he said. She waited. "I need to return to the capital," he said. "I will be leaving Thornmere in 3 days." He paused, and she noted the pause, noted that it was not a pause of uncertainty, but a pause of deliberate construction, a man choosing words that were accurate rather than convenient. "I would ask you to come with me, not as a demand, not as an instruction, as a request, with the understanding that if you say no, you leave here with a letter that ensures your position and your safety for as long as you choose to remain in Thornmere." She looked at him for a long time. "The wolves followed me into the great hall," she said. "Yes." "Not because you directed them?" "No. They have not done that in recorded memory." "In the memory of anyone alive," he said. "The archivist in the capital has a reference, a queen, some generations past. The record is not precise on the year. She looked at the register in her hands, at the wolves still visible in the doorways, patient and unhurried, as though they had already decided and were simply waiting for the people in the room to arrive at the same conclusion. "I would want to finish the season's remedies with Osra before I left," she said. "She will need 2 weeks to train a replacement for the sorting work." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more restrained. 2 weeks, he said. "And I would want the letter regardless," she said. "Not because I intend to use it, because having it is different from needing it." "Yes," he said. "It is." She looked at him once more. The specific grey of his eyes, the held quality of a man containing something larger than his posture suggested, and thought of the first morning, the wall of the lower quarter granary, the bread she had set on the ground without waiting to see if it would be welcomed. Some things, she thought, were simply what you did when you were the kind of person you were. "All right," she said. 2 weeks later, she left Thornmere for the first time. 6 months after that, in the early weeks of the cold season, the great hall of the Vale capital was quieter than usual on an ordinary working morning. The senior council members were occupied with the northern roads, which Casimir had declared formally insufficient, and had assigned 3 separate review committees to assess in detail. Tova had read the initial reports and had opinions about the methodology, which she had written in the margins and left on the council table without being asked. 2 of the 3 committee heads had incorporated her notes. The third had not, which she had accepted and had kept a separate record of, which the 3rd committee head did not yet know. She still worked mornings in the small herb room off the lower kitchen that had been converted for her use. It smelled of the same dried feverfew and wood smoke as the Thornmere apothecary, which she had not expected to miss, and did, occasionally, in the way you miss the smell of a place rather than the place itself. Osra had sent a parcel of cuttings with the autumn courier, labelled in the same blunt handwriting she had always used, with a note that said only, "They will not dry as well in the capital climate. You will need to adjust the timing." It was, by Osra's standards, warm. The burn scar on Tova's left wrist had faded to a thin silver line that she still noticed by habit, the way you notice the mark of a familiar tool. Her hands were still calloused. She had acquired a second scar, smaller, from an unfamiliar blade herb in the capital's apothecary stores that she had handled without proper covering, a mistake she had made precisely once. The wolves came to the capital with her, not 40. 3, the same 3 from the lower quarter doorstep. They lived at the edge of the capital's forest grounds, and appeared with an irregularity that had initially unsettled the stable staff, and had since become ordinary enough that the morning groom left scraps at the forest edge without being asked. The largest of the 3 had taken to appearing at the herb room window in the mornings, which Tova had accepted with the pragmatic grace of someone who has learned to incorporate persistent facts into her working day. Casimir had taken to appearing there as well, less predictably than the wolf, but with a similar quality of deliberate presence, arriving without announcement, sitting on the stone ledge near the window, and offering information the way someone else might offer conversation. The state of the northern road reports, the particular stubbornness of the eldest council member on questions of border adjustment, his private assessment of the Ashford situation, which was proceeding correctly and would probably resolve without spectacle, which he considered the best possible outcome for everyone involved. She had come to understand that this was his version of being with another person, offering things that cost him something. He was not by nature forthcoming. He had learned, in 11 years of ruling, to hold information as a form of safety, giving it away voluntarily to a person whose judgment he had decided to trust was the specific vulnerability he had apparently decided was acceptable. She received it without performance. She offered her own in return, the margin notes the adjusted timing of the herb drying, the opinion she had not been asked for but gave anyway because it was accurate. He received these in the same way she received his, without performance, without pretense that it was not what it was. On the morning she was thinking of, early in the cold season, the capital frost still thin on the stones, the light the particular flat grey of a winter that has not yet decided to fully arrive. She was at the herb room table with the third committee's road report, and Casimir was on the stone ledge, working through the northern requisitions, and the wolf was at the window, its chin on the sill, watching Tova in the unhurried way it had apparently always been going to. She noted a figure error in the third committee's stone quantity estimate, and wrote a correction in the margin. Casimir looked up. "You found something." "A figure error," she said. "The load estimate is wrong by a factor of roughly 12%, which means the timeline is also wrong, which means the committee head is going to present a budget to the council on false numbers in approximately 3 weeks. How certain are you?" She turned the report toward him. He read it. He was quiet for a moment. 3 weeks, he said, if they proceed as scheduled. "I'll have Edrith flag it for review before the presentation." "That would be better than after," she said. He returned the report. Their fingers did not quite overlap on the transfer. She was aware of the deliberate precision of that. A man who was careful about the distance between reaching for something and taking it. The wolf made a low sound. Not distress. Something else. The sound of a large animal settling more comfortably into a position it has already decided on. "It's going to snow," Tova said. "The stablemaster said the same thing this morning. The stablemaster is probably right." She returned to the report. He returned to the requisitions. The wolf shifted its chin on the windowsill and closed its eyes. Outside, the light was still flat and grey, the sky still carrying all of its weather quietly, not yet prepared to release it. The cold in the stone of the herb room was the cold of an old building that has absorbed 300 winters into its walls and offers them back slowly. She had lived in a stone building all her life. She knew the difference between cold that was merely cold and cold that was inhabited, that had breath in it, that meant you were not alone in it. She knew which kind this was. She did not look up from the report. She did not need to. The wolf was at the window. Casimir was on the ledge. The snow, when it came, would come the same as always. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. What would you have done? Given your last bread to a stranger, or kept it for yourself?